The restaurant buzzed around me with laughter, clinking glasses, and the faint strum of background music. I smiled politely, even though these gatherings always made me feel like I was performing on a stage I didn't ask for. My fingers toyed with the stem of my wine glass, the coolness anchoring me. David was in his element, cracking jokes, making everyone laugh. For a fleeting second I thought, maybe tonight will be easy. But life has a way of pulling the rug when you least expect it. Then Sophie leaned in, her lips curling into that smug smirk that always hinted at something cruel. She raised her voice just enough to make sure the whole table caught every word. "You know, David promised me he'd leave you soon." The words didn't just hit me, they ripped through me. I froze, my grip on the glass so tight I feared it might shatter. Gasps circled the table, forks hovered midair, and in that instant, the entire night changed. I blinked hard, fighting the sudden sting in my eyes. "Excuse me? What did you just say?" My voice was calm, but inside, my heart was thundering so violently it made my chest ache. David nearly choked on his drink, his face flushed with panic. "Sophie, shut up, that's not—" But she cut him off, louder this time, almost triumphant. "Oh, don't play dumb, David. You told me she was just temporary." The silence that followed was suffocating, as though the entire room had stopped breathing with me. Heat rushed to my face, but I refused to give Sophie the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. I steadied my breath, lifted my chin, and forced my hand to loosen around the glass before it betrayed me. The laughter and chatter that had filled the room seconds ago were gone, replaced by an oppressive silence that pressed against my chest. I could feel eyes darting between us, pity dripping from their stares like poison I didn't ask for. David reached for my arm, his fingers trembling, but I pulled back before his touch could brand me with shame. "Kate, it's not what she's saying," he stammered, his voice cracking under the weight of his own lies. My lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile, wasn't quite a snarl. "Not what she's saying?" I repeated, tasting bitterness on my tongue. She seemed awfully confident, David. Every syllable sliced sharper than a knife. I could see Sophie basking in the chaos she'd unleashed, her smirk widening as if she had finally stolen center stage. The humiliation burned hot under my skin, but beneath it, something colder began to stir, something steadier, stronger. I knew if I stayed a second longer, tears would betray me. So I slid my chair back, smoothed my dress, and forced my voice into a steady, almost graceful tone. "Excuse me," I said to the table, my dignity intact though my heart was breaking. I left them there, but my fury followed me out the door. The cool night air slapped my face as I stepped outside, a harsh contrast to the suffocating heat inside that dining room. My heels clicked against the pavement, each step a battle between rage and restraint. I wanted to scream, to crumble, to demand answers right there in front of everyone. But no, humiliation had been Sophie's stage, not mine. My performance would come later, behind closed doors, where David wouldn't have an audience to shield him. I sat in the car for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel as though it could anchor me. My reflection in the rearview mirror startled me. Mascara smudged slightly, eyes burning, lips trembling with the effort of holding everything back. How dare he? How dare he promise another woman my absence, as if I were some piece of furniture he could replace when it no longer matched the decor of his life? That thought alone steadied me, turned my tears to fire. Inside me, something shifted. Quiet, deliberate. If Sophie thought she had won tonight, she couldn't be more wrong. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the spark that lit a fuse I hadn't known I carried. As I drove home, every passing streetlight etched a vow deeper into my chest. David owed me answers, and I would drag the truth out of him if I had to. And once I had it, well, let's just say Sophie's smug little smirk wouldn't survive what came next. The house was dark when I walked in, but my fury lit every corner brighter than any lamp ever could. I didn't bother with small talk or pretending nothing had happened. I wanted the truth, and I wanted it now. David followed close behind, fumbling with his keys, his nervous energy filling the silence between us. My arms crossed instinctively, a shield I refused to lower. "So?" I said, my voice sharper than I intended, though part of me wanted it to cut. "How long have you been promising my replacement?" The words echoed in the stillness, settling heavy in the air. He flinched, like a man caught stealing in broad daylight. His hands went up defensively, as if surrendering would erase what Sophie had spilled so carelessly. "It was just talk," he stammered, his voice shaking. I was confused. I never meant... I laughed then, not because anything was funny, but because the absurdity of his excuse was almost unbearable. "Don't insult me with lies, David. She knew too much. She said it with confidence. You fed her that hope." My voice was steady now, almost too calm, which seemed to rattle him even more. David's eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape, but there was nowhere to run. "Kate, please," he whispered, stepping closer, his voice breaking like glass under weight. "I still love you." That word, love, sounded like poison dripping from his tongue. My arms tightened across my chest, my nails digging into my skin, a reminder to myself not to crumble. "Love?" I repeated, letting the word hang there, heavy and hollow. "You loved the idea of me staying put, holding this house together while you rehearsed your future with her." His face twisted, caught between shame and panic, and for a moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. But pity is wasted on someone who sharpens knives behind your back while kissing your cheek. I watched him swallow hard, his Adam's apple bobbing like he was choking on his own lies. He reached out again, but I stepped back, the distance between us now more than physical. I wasn't his safe place anymore, not his anchor. I was the storm gathering, and he could see it in my eyes. He stuttered something, some half-formed apology, but I raised a hand to silence him. The time for begging hadn't even begun. His lips trembled as he searched for words that could soften the blow, but every second of silence only hardened me further. "You don't get it, do you?" I said quietly, my voice low but slicing through him sharper than a scream ever could. "You thought you'd have time. Time to juggle us both. Time to decide when I was no longer convenient. But that choice is no longer yours." His face went pale, his jaw tightening like he was bracing for impact. "Kate, please, don't do this. We can fix it. I'll cut it off with her, I'll prove it." His desperation might have touched me once, but not anymore. I felt nothing but a cold clarity, the kind that doesn't waver. I tilted my head slightly, studying him like a stranger I'd outgrown. "No, David, you don't get to rewrite the ending. You already cast me aside in whispers to her." I stepped closer then, not in affection, but in finality. My voice carried an icy calm that froze him in place. "You wanted me temporary? Fine. But here's the twist. You're the one leaving." His eyes widened, panic swelling, but I didn't flinch. In that moment, I wasn't the woman he betrayed. I was the woman who would decide how his betrayal would cost him everything. And though he didn't know it yet, the reckoning had only just begun. The next morning, the house felt colder, as if even the walls had recoiled from the night before. David moved around me cautiously, whispering useless words like sorry and mistake. But I tuned them out, my mind already working elsewhere. I wasn't going to scream anymore. I wasn't going to beg or cry. I was going to gather the truth piece by piece, and when I was done, there would be no way for him to wriggle free. I started small. Bank statements, receipts, late-night charges that didn't line up. Every paper I touched felt like proof that my instincts had never lied to me. My hands trembled at times, yes, but they never stopped turning the pages. never stopped looking deeper. I scrolled through his messages when he wasn't looking, catching fragments of conversations, whispers dressed as digital words. And every discovery only sharpened the blade I was quietly forging. When I called my lawyer, my voice didn't shake. "I need to know exactly what my options are," I said, sitting at my desk, a pen clenched tight between my fingers. She reminded me of the clause in our prenup, one I had almost forgotten. Infidelity meant I kept the house, the assets, nearly everything. Her tone was matter-of-fact, but to me it sounded like justice finally leaning in my favor. And in that moment, I knew. I wasn't just preparing for divorce. I was preparing for war. David must have sensed something was off, but he mistook my silence for surrender. He tried to slip back into routine, coffee in the mornings, forced smiles at dinner, as though pretending could stitch us back together. What he didn't realize was that every quiet nod, every calm glance was me watching, waiting, collecting. He was living in the illusion of control, while I was already dismantling his world piece by piece. Late at night, when the house was still, I sat with folders spread across the table. Bank transfers he couldn't explain, hotel receipts tucked between business expenses, messages with Sophie that dripped with arrogance. Each page was another nail in the coffin he built for himself. My heart hurt, of course it did, but pain had transformed into focus. And focus is far more dangerous than rage. I found myself remembering little things. His distracted smile at dinner parties, the sudden work trips that stretched longer than they should have, the way he avoided eye contact when I asked about his day. They weren't random anymore. They were puzzle pieces that finally clicked together. And with every revelation, my resolve only deepened. I wasn't just uncovering betrayal. I was setting the stage for his downfall. When I met with my lawyer again, she leaned forward, tapping the prenup with her pen. "If you can prove the affair, the clause is clear. Everything goes to you." Her words settled into me like steel. I nodded, my voice steady, even colder than before. "Good. I don't want a divorce filled with pity. I want justice." And for the first time since Sophie's smirk shattered my world, I felt control returning to my hands. At home, David noticed the distance, but mistook it for hurt. He hovered in doorways, offering half-hearted apologies, his eyes searching for softness in me. He didn't realize the softness was gone, replaced by something sharper, something calculated. I answered him with clipped words, polite nods, and silence that gnawed at him more than shouting ever could. The silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. Each day that passed, I felt the ground shift in my favor. He thought I was retreating, but in truth, I was preparing the perfect strike. The beauty of silence is that it blinds the enemy, lulls them into comfort, makes them careless. And David was careless, still feeding Sophie promises he didn't know I was already recording in my mind. Soon, I told myself, soon I would invite them both into the same room. And when I did, the stage would be mine. I chose the night carefully, framing it as a gesture of peace. "Let's sit down, all of us," I told David, my voice measured, almost tender. He looked relieved, desperate to believe I was softening. Sophie, on the other hand, practically leapt at the invitation. She thought she'd won already, that this dinner was her coronation. Neither of them realized they were walking straight into my theater, where I alone would direct the scene. I set the table with care, candles glowing just enough to soften the edges, wine poured generously, the air thick with false intimacy. David fidgeted across from me, tugging at his collar. Sophie arrived in a cloud of perfume, too sweet, too loud, the kind of scent that tried to claim space it didn't deserve. She smiled at me, smug and certain, but I met her with a smile of my own, one sharpened at the edges. When we sat down, I pressed record on my phone, hidden just beneath the napkin at my side. My heart pounded, but my face betrayed nothing. I leaned toward Sophie, my voice honeyed, smooth. So, Sophie, do you still believe David will leave me for you? Her smirk widened, careless, eager to gloat. Of course, she said, her tone dripping with arrogance. He told me himself, your marriage is done. He just needed time. And in that moment, I knew the trap had sprung perfectly. David's head snapped toward her, panic written all over his face. Sophie, stop it. You're making it worse. His voice cracked like glass under pressure. He reached across the table, but his hands shook too much to steady himself. Sophie laughed lightly, dismissing his desperation. Oh, come on, David. Don't act like you didn't say it. You told me you were done with her, that it was only a matter of time. I leaned back in my chair, letting their words hang heavy in the air. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure they could hear it, but my expression stayed calm, almost serene. I shifted slightly, my finger brushing the phone's screen, confirming that every damning word was being captured. They were too busy unraveling to notice. When David turned to me, his eyes wide with dread, I tilted my head and spoke softly, almost kindly. Oh, she's not making it worse, I said, letting a slow smile curl across my lips. She's giving me exactly what I needed. Sophie froze mid-smirk, the color draining from her face as she realized her arrogance had just betrayed them both. David dropped his gaze, already defeated, though he hadn't yet seen just how deep the cut would go. The silence that followed was thick, almost suffocating, broken only by the faint crackle of the candle flames. Sophie fidgeted with her glass now, her confidence drained away, leaving her exposed. David tried to speak, but the words tangled in his throat. For once, I didn't rush to fill the quiet. I let it stretch, let it press down on them until their own guilt became unbearable. I folded my hands on the table, steady and deliberate, my eyes fixed on Sophie. You see, I said evenly, truth has a funny way of showing up when you least expect it. Her face blanched, her mouth opening and closing like she was scrambling for a script she hadn't rehearsed. David buried his face in his hands, his shoulders slumped with the weight of his own ruin. Inside, I felt a strange calm wash over me. Not relief, not joy, but something sharper. The evidence was mine now, sealed and undeniable. They thought tonight was about reconciliation, about me bending or breaking. But tonight was the night I wrote the ending on my terms, and as I blew out the candles one by one, I knew the next act wouldn't be played at this table. It would be at the door when David finally learned what it meant to be replaced. A few days later, the house no longer felt like his. Boxes lined the hallway, packed neatly with his shirts, his books, even the watch I once gave him that he had the nerve to wear on nights with her. Each item stacked outside the door felt like a piece of him being stripped away, exiled from the life he thought he controlled. I stood in the entryway, divorce papers in hand, my heartbeat steady. This was no longer grief, it was closure dressed in victory. When David walked in and saw the boxes, his face twisted into disbelief, then rage. "What the hell is this?" he shouted, his voice echoing through walls that no longer belonged to him. I didn't flinch. Instead, I held the papers out, my hand steady, my voice calm. Proof of your betrayal, our prenup clause, and a signed divorce agreement. I get the house, the assets, the freedom. You get Sophie. For a second, he looked like a man drowning, grasping for air that wasn't there. His anger collapsed into desperation, his voice breaking. "Kate, please, don't do this. We can fix it. I'll change." But I'd heard every version of that promise before, whispered into Sophie's ear when he thought I wasn't listening. And now, I held the one promise he couldn't escape, the one where he left with nothing. I didn't give him room to beg. The moment his plea left his lips, I cut him off, my tone colder than I thought myself capable of. "No, David. Sophie said you promised to leave me. Congratulations. Promise fulfilled. His mouth fell open, but no words came. He looked small then, smaller than I had ever seen him, a man undone by his own arrogance. Sophie appeared in the doorway, her eyes darting between us, expecting me to crumble, to lash out, to fight for him. Instead, I stepped aside and gestured toward the boxes. "He's all yours," I told her, my voice steady, almost kind. Her smirk was gone, replaced by the realization that she had inherited not a man, but the wreckage he had become. David turned back to me, eyes glistening, his hands half raised like he could still pull me back into his orbit. But I stood rooted, unshaken, the papers pressed against his chest until he took them. The sound of them crumpling in his grip was music to me. This wasn't just a breakup, it was a transfer of power. And for once, I was the one closing the door. With one hand, I pulled the door wide open. With the other, I pointed to the boxes stacked outside. His face was pale, Sophie's was flushed, and together they looked less like lovers and more like exiles. "You wanted a new beginning?" I said softly. "Well, here it is. Out there, not in here." And before he could answer, I slammed the door shut, the sound reverberating like a gavel sealing his fate. Leaning against the wood, I closed my eyes and drew in a deep, steady breath. For the first time in years, the air inside felt light, free of the lies that had poisoned it. My body trembled, not from fear or grief, but from release. It wasn't the tears of a woman abandoned. It was the calm of a woman who had taken back everything stolen from her. I straightened, walking through the rooms that now belonged only to me, each step echoing with new ownership. The house wasn't a battlefield anymore. It was mine, untouched by deceit. And as I reached the window, watching David and Sophie stumble under the weight of his boxes, I felt it clear as day. Revenge hadn't broken me. It had rebuilt me,